Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of my show, William Wallace for America. Today I have a really unique interview to show everybody. It's a good story about America, a good story that happened in America. It's about a person that I think that you'll want to know, that you haven't maybe gotten to know. I just think it's a real good, interesting story. With me today is Richard Lipsey. Richard, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Good, Wheeler. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're, as you can see, you're going to hear a duck in the background. We're actually in a sporting goods distributorship. Is that correct?
We are a large sporting goods distributorship that I founded back in the 70s.
Well, what I find interesting is that we're going to circle around a couple times on a story about you, because I think that some of your life stories actually kind of end up circling around and reconnecting in other ways, and our viewers are going to watch that, I guess. So, Louisiana boy, from what I understand.
That's right. Born in Alabama, but my family moved here when I was 5 years old. My father's uncle had a company here called Steinberg Hide and Fur Company, and Dad came to work to run the company during the war. And
so this was already existed. Your dad came to run the company.
My dad came to run the Hide and Fur Company during the war. And after the war, my great uncle, so Dad's uncle, sold the company to Dad. And we went through many phases from that period in the late 40s, 50s, 60s. We went from a hide and fur business to a scrap iron business, and then to a metals business, and then finally went into the Army-Navy surplus business, really. And the Army-Navy surplus business lasted several years until a friend of Dad's told him, you know, if you put a few rods and reels and a few guns in here, you'd have a sporting goods store. And so it became a sporting goods store in the 50s and grew, and I went to LSU, graduated in 1961, went in the Army, and came out of the Army in 64, and came back, and Dad said, okay, time for you to run the business.
Time for you to run the company.
I really had plans to go back to law school, but at that time, my brother moved out of, he was working at the company, and he moved out of the city to Alexandria, Louisiana. So Dad said, okay, it's your turn to take over.
So all of this was going on right here in the Baton Rouge area?
Yes, everything was right here in Baton Rouge.
So you're watching Baton Rouge really grow. I mean, you were here. Your father was here, and I guess you said the 40s and the 50s. Is that what he took over Steinberg's?
That's correct.
The fur business.
Yeah,
you don't think of the fur industry here now. You wouldn't. Right. You wouldn't imagine that, but
Louisiana was the #1 fur state in the whole country, and #2 in fur production outside of Russia in the 1930s and 40s.
#2 behind Russia.
Behind Russia.
Had no idea.
Mink, otter, muskrat, raccoon, all until the Nutria invaded it in the 50s and really just killed off all the other animals.
So the Nutria took over all the other animals, and
right.
I didn't realize that.
The Nutria came in, and they would build their breeding grounds on top of the breeding grounds of the other animals, and really, literally, almost made all the other animals extinct.
So was that the catalyst for your father, who was running the company, I guess at that time, to kind of look at other avenues? He saw that coming.
That was one of the things, yes. But like I said, we were after the war, Army-Navy surplus business, and that just kind of converted into the sporting goods business when a guy named the Old Beachcomber, Bob Scares, told my dad, put in a few rods and reels and guns.
Yeah.
You're in the sporting goods business. So that's how it came about. And, we stayed in the retail sporting goods pretty much until the early 60s when I came out of the Army. And I did take over the sporting goods business, and we stayed in the sport. I stayed in the sporting goods business for almost over 20 years. But in '77, I decided to go in the wholesale business. There was a good friend of mine here in Baton Rouge by the name of George McNutt, who had been in a wholesale gun business and sporting goods, hunting and fishing, and he decided to retire. And it was a small Louisiana sporting goods distributor, and I decided to buy it from him, and I bought it from him, and I tried to do everything. I tried hunting, I tried fishing, I tried sporting goods. I had, at that time, we were a distributor for Converse shoes, so we distributed shoes, and we did that for almost 10 years. And in the mid-'80s, I decided, a friend of mine talked me into it. There was a program at Harvard for guys my age then, which were in the 40s, to go back and get a business degree, so MBA. So I decided to do that. It was a 3-year summer program.
So you actually went to Harvard.
I actually went to Harvard for 3 summers.
When you're your 40s?
In my 40s. And when I graduated, my professors told me, because you discuss your own business a lot in this program, and they told me that we were trying to do too many things, satisfy too many people, and they said I should focus. And that's one thing I learned that I'll never forget. Anything you do, you need to focus.
Right.
And you need to do what you're passionate about. So I was passionate about hunting, passionate about the firearms industry, and I needed to focus.
Right.
So I sold off the sporting goods, I sold off the shoes, I sold off the fishing tackle, and decided in 1987 I would get out of the retail business. So I closed a couple of the stores we had, and then did going out of business sales on the other stores.
Right.
And so by 1988, I was focusing on the gun industry.
And
we went from a multi-million-dollar business in sales down to $500,000 in guns in 1988.
so you're probably kind of, did I make the right decision here?
I had to think about it. In 1988, there were 110 gun distributors, firearms distributors, and we were the smallest one. Today, there are less than 20 gun distributors, and we're the largest.
In Louisiana or
in the country.
You're the largest gun distributor in the country?
Yes.
This is amazing. This is amazing. And people don't realize, and that's kind of why I did this interview, wanted to do this interview, people don't realize that we have you in Louisiana, but what a gem of an industry, but what a gem of a business, and what a gem of a business person I have in our state.
Well, everybody gets lucky along the way.
Yeah.
But you don't do it alone.
Yeah.
And I think you probably
Absolutely.
know that. We started when I decided to focus down on this business. We started with 19 people. Today we have over 150 people, and it is the people, the employees here at Lipsey's that makes our company so valuable. We've got lots of long-term employees. Nobody ever,
Yeah, your assistant was telling me she's been with you for almost 30 years.
Yeah, nobody ever leaves.
I love
And
this.
we have a good company, good people, And like any business, people make the difference.
And I want to tell also now want to tell a story, or I get to a story that I think is a very interesting part of your life that may have shaped you. I mean, people might think that all of this, the business blood, entrepreneurship that you got from your father and your family and being the business may have been what makes you today. But I look and see something else, another story about you that we'll pick up after you went to Harvard on the Bayou here at LSU, or Harvard on the Big Bayou. Before you went to Harvard up north, you went to Harvard on the Big Bayou here in Louisiana as a young man, and you were in the ROTC, if I understand that right.
I was with you. I graduated from LSU in 1961, and my plans were to go right into to law school. But also the year I graduated, 1961, was the Berlin crisis. And so our whole class of ROTC cadets at LSU, when we got commissioned, instead of being able to get a deferment and go to law school, then come back and do your service, we all had to go directly into the Army. So I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, and did my officer training at Fort Benning, Georgia. And then my assignment was to go to an Army base in South Carolina. But at the last minute, all of the lieutenants, fresh lieutenants in our class, there was Camp Polk, Louisiana,
Okay.
in Leesville. And the Army decided to reopen that as a major training camp. So they changed it back from Camp Polk to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and our class was sent to Fort Polk. So I ended up back here in Louisiana, went to Fort Polk, started off as a platoon leader, and then a special services officer, putting together the golf course, actually built a skeet and trap field, and did a lot of other work at the fort, including getting all of the billets, all of the officers' quarters and enlisted quarters ready for this influx of thousands of soldiers coming into Fort Polk. So I'd been there a few months, and a new general came in, a major general came in from France, where he had been stationed, he and his family. When they got to the post, our chief of staff asked me if I would go take the general on a tour of the Fort Polk.
Correct.
I'd been there longer than anybody.
Yeah.
And I knew where everything was. So I took the general on a tour, of Fort Polk, and excuse me.
No, that's all right. Bless
Excuse me. Took the general on a tour of Fort Polk, and later that afternoon, I got a call from the chief of staff saying, Lieutenant Lipsey, the general would like you to come to his house at 6 o'clock. I had no idea what or why. But
were you being reprimanded? Or?
I did not know, but I went to the general's home right on the base at 6 o'clock, and the general came in and invited me to sit down, introduced to me his wife and 4 of his 6 children. Two were off at college, and he asked me would I like to be his junior aide de camp. I had no idea what an aide de camp was.
Right.
I didn't know generals had aides.
Right.
But whatever it was, I said, certainly I'll be happy to. I'd love to. Anything to get out from what I was doing.
Right.
And so I became the general's aide, and basically just followed him around, was his gopher, did whatever he wanted me to do. And a few more months passed by, and he got a call from General Wheeler. My general's name was Philip C. Wheel.
Yeah.
and WEHLE. And the chief of staff of the Army was Earl Wheeler, a 4-star general. He got a call from General Wheeler saying, General Wheeler, I know you're from Alexandria, Virginia, which is right, next
Right.
to Washington. He said, and I know you're a few years away from retirement. Would you like to move to Washington and take over the military district of Washington? And of course, General Wheeler said, absolutely.
Right.
So,
back home.
So anyhow, within a couple of weeks, come here, Joe. Come here. Within a couple of weeks, we packed up and moved to Washington, and the general took me with him, and which was terrific. And so when we got to Washington, an interesting story, William, when we got to Washington, the day that we got there, we went to see General Wheeler and in the Pentagon. And General Wheeler introduced me to General Wheeler, and he said, Phil, he called my boss Phil. Phil, he said, you can have a colonel and a major here in Washington as your aides. And General Wheeler looked at him right in the eye. I said, oh, hell no. He said, Lieutenant Lipsey does everything I need done. I don't need anybody else. Of course, that made
you honored. That's what I like to. That's part of the reason I like this story is it shows the respect that you earned.
So I really, that was very nice. So we went from General Wheeler's office. He said, well, you need to go meet the president because you'll be seeing him 3 or 4 times a week probably in the job that you're doing here.
Right.
As the commanding general of Washington. You're in charge of all social events, funerals, state funerals, and there were 2 elderly presidents at the time.
Right.
And so many other things that go on in Washington. So you need to go meet him. So we went from there to the White House. We go into President Kennedy's office, and just like you and I are sitting here, General Wheel and President Kennedy sat in 2 chairs, and there was a rocking chair off to the side, and President Kennedy said, Lipsey, you sit in my rocking chair. And while General Wheel and I had this discussion, so, about 6-8 feet away, I went and sat in the president's rocking chair and got to know him. And when we got ready to leave, he said, now, Lieutenant, you'll be coming to the White House a lot too, so if you have any time off and you want to help us out here at the White House, I'll make the arrangements. I said, yes, sir, I'll do anything. But anyhow,
that's pretty amazing that the President of the United States noticed your service.
Well, he did. He was very nice about it. We had a nice conversation, and it sort of shocked me. But in my job with General Wheel, we worked several nights a week, every week. I didn't know that we would be doing so, going to so many embassy parties and things like that. But as time went on, it slowed down a little bit. So I had 2 or 3 nights a week that I could go work social events at the White House. So I did that and kind of became President Kennedy's social aide. I would introduce them at parties, stand in receiving lines, and introduce he and Jackie. So it was a dual service thing, but I really enjoyed.
So you had a chance to know the president and Jackie Kennedy on a personal level, be involved in the White House with them, on not just a business level, but also on a personal level.
I did. I got to know them very well, particularly the president, more so than Jackie. She spent a lot of time up at Hyannisport. They had just lost an infant child, and so I really didn't see her that much, but I was with the president quite often and got to be very friendly with him. And as it turned out, of course, that tragic day in 1963, in November, when the president was assassinated, One of the functions of General Wheels' office, our office, was we were in charge of state funerals. So literally, we were in charge of the body from the time they got it off the airplane from Dallas in Washington.
So were you in Dallas?
No, we were in Washington.
Okay.
When we were notified the president had been shot. I was standing outside actually of General Wheels' house. We'd gone to lunch. I dropped him off with the driver, and at lunch, and then I'd gone to my BOQ for lunch. The driver had picked me up. We did this, it was our regular routine every day, and we'd go back to the general's house and just sit outside, and he'd come out every day at 1 o'clock, and boom, we'd go back to the office. And so we were just standing outside chatting, listening to, had the radio on in the automobile, and heard the news the president's been shot. When I heard that, I started to run towards the general's back door, and boy, the general had his radio on. He heard the same thing. Boy, he came flying out the door. So we jumped in the car. This is at Fort Myer, Virginia.
Right.
And right across the river from Washington. Our office was at Fort McNair, right about a mile from the Capitol. And so we started heading out to go to Fort McNair when we got a call. We had a red phone in the car that had never ever run, and it was direct to the White House, and it was Mrs. Lincoln, the president's secretary, saying, "Come to the White House immediately." And so we took off. A lot of traffic stopped, dead still.
Right.
You know, people were just in awe. They didn't know what to think, you know, listening to their radios in those days.
Right.
And didn't have cell phones that were carrying around.
Yeah.
And so by the time we got to the White House, it was definite the president was dead. And they were all in hysteria, the whole White House staff. And it was really nothing at that point we could do at the White House. So we turned around and headed to our office, where we had a room set up by the time we got there with people from the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, the DC Police, the FBI, the Secret Service. Had 100 people in the room, and there was a book prepared in case of the death of a president. Not particular one that had been assassinated.
Right.
But we had that book. And so all afternoon, General Wheel led a discussion with all these other people, officers, generals, and from every branch of the service and so on and so forth, planning what to do as soon as, from the time the body arrived to where it would lay in state, to where you know, he would be buried, everything. And so we did that until about 5:30 in the afternoon, and then we had timing. We knew what time the body would arrive in Washington. So we all went to Andrews Air Force Base and got the body off the plane. And General Wheel and I had a helicopter with the honor guard in it from the 3rd Infantry. And so when we had the casket secured in a hearse, and Jackie got in a hearse, and we put our car in the front. And of course we had the Washington police.
So you were there when the body came off the
We
plane.
got the body off the plane. And
Did
put
you
it
have to
in
witness
the hearse.
anything? Did you have to?
Not at that point, no. We just got the body off, put it in the hearse, and then we took the helicopter to Bethesda Naval Hospital, and then our automobile and the police led the parade more or less to the Naval Bethesda Hospital. We were there when it got there. General Wheel was at the front door of the hospital to meet Jackie. When they came in, the hearse with the body pulled around the back to the morgue. Mm-hmm. I was in the morgue, and with the members of the 3rd Infantry Honor Guard, the Honor Guard from Arlington Cemetery. And we got the casket out of the hearse, brought it into the morgue, and opened it.
The cat.
A medic that was in the room. A Navy medic was in the room, and we opened the casket, and he and I picked the body up and put it on the stainless steel table where the autopsy would have been done, and took him out of the body.
I want to ask about that moment. Something just came to mind when I think about that moment.
Sure.
Here you were, you've spent time with the President of the United States in social functions, in business functions, in the White House, on a scale where, you're a lieutenant, young man, well, you're probably 20 at that point. 23 at that
24.
Yeah, 24 at that point. You're a young man, and you were in his presence when he was the most powerful person in the world, and now you're picking him up out of a casket and putting him on a table where, not that you're more powerful than he was at that moment, but you're in control of his presence at that point. That's a significant power.
That's a very good observation. When we picked the body up, put it on the table, got him out of the body bag, put him on the table, and the nude body of the president was there, and one of these medics brought in, it had literally a bucket and a brush, and of course, before we did anything, let me just back up, we put it on the table, and then a couple of photographers came in and took multiple photographs of the body, and then they did a couple of x-rays, and then once they had finished, doing that before the doctors came in, then the two of us wiped the body down. The blood that was on the body, and I won't go into all the details, but we kind of wiped the body down, and to be standing there, back to your point, looking at the body, the nude body of the president laying on the table, somebody that I'd seen so many times in his office, always upright. Everybody knew he had a back problem, or back brace a lot of the times, but to see this person that was so majestic, the sense of awe, the sense of that you got from him, that he was in control. He was so brilliant. He was a man of vision, the smartest man I'd ever met in my life. He knew where he wanted to take this country. He knew where we should be. He knew that we should be in space. He knew we should land on the moon. He had a great vision for our country, and he was a great leader. And to see him laying there with motionless, no power, it was just frightening to me. Chills ran up and down my spine. I'd never seen a dead man. And here you are, here I am, a 24-year-old guy looking at the body of the President of the United States. My boss had told me, from the time we get to that Bethesda Naval Hospital, you don't leave that body. So once we cleaned the body off, the doctors came in. I moved away about the distance you and I are from this camera, about 6 feet, and it was in the morgue, and there were 2 benches where people would sit and watch autopsies. And so I took a seat right there, less than 6 feet away, and sat there for 3 hours while the doctors performed the autopsy. And when the autopsy was over, and they left, we sealed the room, and I put guards on both doors. And General Wheel and I, who were in our everyday uniforms, ran back to the Fort Myer, changed into our dress uniforms. General Wheel, by the way, all this time had been on the 17th floor of the hospital with Jackie, planning the funeral. He met her at the front door. They went up to the 17th floor, and he was with her the whole time, while he told me not to leave the body. So actually, when the autopsy was over, somebody went up and got him. He came down, told me, let's secure this room, let's go put on our dress uniform. So we left, zoomed back to Fort Myer, changed clothes, put on our dress uniforms, zoomed right back to the hospital. We had our driver go pick up the president's clothes that Jackie wanted to bury him in at the White House. We go back to the hospital. Then I sat there another 3.5 hours. I let the gentleman from Galler's funeral home in, and they really put the body back together, and that took about 3.5 hours.
It's amazing. Again, you see a president, commanding our country and the leader of our free world and the most powerful person in the world, to going to taking his body out of the casket, laying it on, like we've talked about what that moment was like. But then you switch to, now you're watching an autopsy. Yeah. You've never seen a dead person, and now you're witnessing the autopsy of the same man that you've seen fully dressed, fully, in control, and now you see them all in the same day putting that person back together. Essentially.
It was all a surrealistic moment, and we did that, though. We see, and I sit there, I watched them do a fabulous job of sewing him up and fixing the side of the head where the head shot was. And anyhow, they did that, and when they were finished, another friend of mine that had come in to the room from the Third Army, we dressed the president and laid him. Their new casket had been brought in that Jackie wanted, and we dressed the president, and I put him in his casket and closed the casket, and to my knowledge, it was never opened again. But there's another story about when he was lying in state. We left Jackie in the room. She wanted to be in the room alone with him. Now, whether she opened the casket or not, I don't know. But anyhow, that pretty much is the story, and then the burial and so on. And being in charge of that funeral was quite something.
So this is a less than 24, 48-hour period. You probably didn't sleep during that time.
Certainly not the first night. The second night second day we were at the White House, where President Truman and President Eisenhower was still alive, and so many other dignitaries came to pay respects to Jackie and to the body. And then that night, we did get back probably at close to 11 o'clock that night. So we did get that one night. We got a couple hours rest, but not a lot. That was about it. Up very early, back to the White House on the day that we moved the body where we lied and stayed at the Capitol, and then the next day the funeral. It was a hell of a 72-hour period from beginning to end.
Now you would think that with a story like this that you would have probably made a career out of the Army, but you didn't stay in the Army very long.
No, I didn't, and the reason I didn't was because General Wheel, the man that I worked for, was a terrific man. Mm-hmm. I knew that he was going to retire in a couple of years, and if I would have re-upped, I would have had to stay in 3 more years. And at the same time, President Johnson asked me to stay on as a White House aide, and it was a whole different atmosphere under President Johnson in the White House. And I really did not, it wasn't the same for me. No reflection on President Johnson. But it was entirely different atmosphere, different feeling, different people. And I decided at that time I would just continue to work for General Wheel. And then in January, my tour was up. So I decided my father wanted me to come home and run the business. So that's just what I did.
So this is one of those perfect storm moments, I guess. So, you've been through one of the most traumatic experiences that a young man can go through in history at a point when, this is something that will be in our history books forever, and you were a part of it in a very unique way. And the White House has changed, and the whole sentiment has changed, and the military has changed for you, and Dad makes the phone call, and at that moment, you just know it's the right thing to do.
That's right.
And so you came back to Harvard on the Bayou, where you came back to Baton Rouge, and how long did it take you to get back into the swing of things?
It didn't take long at all. I came home on New Year's Day and went to work the next day, and I've never regretted it. I've never looked back. We were in several businesses, as we talked about, the hide and fur business, the scrap iron business, and I could see in my dad, we talked about it a lot, that, the future, what we really wanted just to get out of all those other businesses and concentrate on the sporting goods business. So that's what we did, and my father, great father, gave me full leeway what to do, and so we tried to grow the sporting goods retail business, and did that through the 60s and 70s. My father passed away in the early 70s, but he had let me do what I wanted, so I was running the business anyhow. And then in 1977, I had this opportunity to buy this local sporting goods distributor. Did that, and things just evolved from there. From the general sporting goods wholesale business till 1987. We discussed, when I decided to get out of the retail business and concentrate on the wholesale business, and from there got out of the sporting goods and fishing tackle, concentrated on the farms industry, so that today we're the largest farms distributor in the country.
I love it. Well, a couple more questions while we wrap up, on some things that have had you for a while, and you've shared some remarkable stories. But what are you, besides business and entrepreneurship, is there anything that you're very passionate about? Is there anything that you believe in that people can take away from this, seeing what you've been through and your sense of duty to our country? Is there anything else that you're passionate about?
Well, I'm passionate about a lot of things, hunting and fishing, but no, if I had to leave a message to anybody, it's that you've got to give back to your community. I'm passionate about my business, but I'm also passionate about certain charitable organizations in Baton Rouge and throughout the country, but I've been very involved because my mother was one of the founders, for instance, of Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center.
Oh, wow.
Here in Baton Rouge. And we've grown it into one of the 3 or 4 major cancer treatment centers in the country.
Yeah.
And I've been involved. I've been on the board. I've been chair of the board. And I've worked for the last 30 years, for Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center. But I've got involved in the Boy Scouts. Well, I didn't have any boys, I had 2 girls.
2 girls, yeah.
But, I've been, for over 50 years, I've been involved with our Stroomy Area Boy Scout Council. And, just many other organizations like that. And our Rotary Club here in Baton Rouge, and several other organizations. So my point being, you have to give back to the
Absolutely,
community.
I agree 100%.
And so I've enjoyed being part of the Baton Rouge community and being able to do different civic activities, charitable activities, and I just have a lot of fun doing that.
I've always said that when I started my radio show, how much I love our country, how much I love the concept of America, and how great I think our country is. And when I started this show, I wanted to be the guy out there promoting those values. And then I ran for office a few years ago, and I actually listened to people. And I listened to people that are different from me, people that have different opinions, people that believe different things. And I realized that after after thousands of conversations, that we all have more in common than we realize, and we can all love our country and fight for our country, but the best way to fix our country is to start in our own communities.
William, that's a very, very good point. I really kind of glossed over that, but one of my activities in the last several years, I started my own Put Louisiana First, which is a PAC, and we get very heavily involved in politics, and the major thing is we want to elect good people.
Right.
And so I spend a lot of time with people in office in the state. I almost hate to use the word politicians,
right,
though that is the correct terminology. You've got the ones that do it for themselves or self-gratification.
Right.
Then you've got the ones that get elected to office that really want to serve the people. And those are the ones that I like to see get elected, the ones that will do good things for our community,
yeah,
good things for our state, and even work on the national level a lot. So I'm pretty heavily involved in politics.
That's one of the reasons I had you on the radar. I did a podcast that I've been working on for a couple months now. That I recorded it this past weekend and actually published it yesterday. And you're talking about one of the things that I mentioned in that podcast where I say that there's a lot of really good elected officials. There's a lot of bad ones, but what I believe in is when there's a good elected official, one of the hardest things they have to do is they go into the arena, they go into the swamp, however you want to put it, and they get swallowed up, and it's harder for them to do the good things that they want to do as a good elected official. But it takes us, it takes the people to stay behind those elected officials and be there to support them and help them so they don't get swallowed up in a system. And they have the backing of people that not only believe in them and see the good things they're doing, but to support them to keep fighting for us and fighting for our communities.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. Anyhow, we've got elections coming up next year, as you know, so and we're going to have to elect a new governor.
Right.
And we've got a lot of members of the House and
the Senate too.
The Senate too up for re-election. So let's hope our people in the state use good judgment.
Right.
And we find
and play nice.
And play nice.
So 2 last questions I ask everybody on closing. You know, what makes America the great country that it is?
Now that's a really good question. There's so many things that go into making America a great country, and first and foremost is freedom.
Right.
It is that we can all are individuals. We all have a right to express our thoughts, and nobody can control us.
Right. Exactly.
And then we live, of course, in a democratic society. Everybody has an equal vote, so we can elect the people to serve us. But what makes it great are the people that will work, the people that will start companies, the people that will work for people and go to work every day to make companies great, to make organizations great.
Right.
And the idea that we're such a complex society made up of many different people, black, white, yellow, and so on.
Right.
And that even in my lifetime, I've seen such a dramatic change in the way we treat each other. And we need to do more treating each other with respect, loving each other, and all men are created equal.
Right.
I wish I'd made that up.
Not to steal it, but you have respect. You use it appropriately.
That's what it is, and one of these days we will treat all people equally and make America great. And it's the greatest country on earth. We're so fortunate that we live in America,
right?
And not in the Ukraine or not in Russia.
Exactly.
And so we've got a lot to be thankful for.
And the last question is, what unites us in our country? Is there a uniting factor that we can all get behind?
Once again, a very good question. I think what unites us is the fact that we have to protect our freedom and our rights. Somebody said that if Russia or whomever would never invade the United States because we've got the biggest army in the world.
Right.
You know, we've got, I don't know how many millions of people out there
right.
that believe in the Second Amendment. They believe in the right to bear arms. They believe in the right to vote. They believe in the right to take care of each other. And so what makes us great is the mishmash of people, that we all meld together as one, and that we fight for human liberty, which is the most important thing, and that we all know to keep our nation great, everybody must succeed in life.
I love
So
that.
we have to help each other succeed.
You know, you're a man after my own heart. These are things I mentioned in this podcast that I mentioned to you that I dropped this weekend. You know, that you know, we all have to, as people, respect each other's freedom. And when we respect each other's freedom, that is how we can show each other love. And that is how we all get united. And when we unite on freedom and liberty, then we make our country, you know, we maintain its greatness. And that's the best way to do it.
Well, I appreciate it.
Richard, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
That was fun.
Absolutely.
And we'll do it again one of these days.
I would love that. And our listeners, please, if you've enjoyed this interview, you can share it. I'd love for you to share it. And also, it's podcasted on any podcast app. If you're listening to that podcast now, then please share it with somebody. It would mean the world to me. And I know Richard Lipsey will probably mean a lot to him, because not only are these good stories, but these are good things to help everyone in our country and our communities. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks.